We sit down with creators, founders, and entrepreneurs who are shaping tomorrow to get an inside view on how they think, lead, and act, and the struggles that go with it. I'm Nick Hughes, and this is Founders Live Conversations. Today, we have a drink with Amy Hutchins of Unearth to get her view on the emerging drone industry, management styles, and finding balance between entrepreneurship and personal life. Hey, Amy. Welcome.
Nick, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yep, take a seat. We are here at the Collective Chemistry Bar, and we are drinking Eagle Rare. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining. I really wanted to sit down and chat with you. There's many different things I want to cover, but first and foremost, you are a Founders Live Seattle winner. What month was that? That was
June.
June, yes. And congratulations again. That was really cool.
Thanks.
Love the pitch. It was awesome. I'm curious. What was the experience like?
Yeah. Good question. It was. I would say it was surprisingly hard leading up to it because I feel like preparing such a short 99-second pitch was extremely challenging for me because I tend to be verbose sometimes. But then actually getting to the event was very relaxed and laid back and kind of surprisingly like just welcoming, and the other people who were pitching were super nice, and it was great to hang out with them, and the crowd just had a really great attitude, and it was awesome. That's great. Yeah, we've crafted a very encouraging, fun community, and it's been great. How did you prepare? Describe, like, because people that are watching this might be someone that might pitch in a future event. Yep. So how did you approach the 99 seconds, because it is very unique? Yeah, so I started off with a pitch that we had given when we were raising around in December. And I pretty quickly threw the entire thing away because nothing was going to fit in a 99-second pitch. And so I ended up just starting from scratch. The most useful thing to me, I got it down to about 5 minutes, which isn't hard. And the most useful thing to me was having Christina come and help actually narrow down my pitch and give me a few pointers. So the pointers that Christina gave me were so helpful in understanding what to cut out, what to keep in, and then as soon as I had it down and I had the slide, then I did the slides, and then I practiced it like 30 times. So you're saying this is Christina from 3C Communications. 3C Communications. Yeah. So if you could remember like one or two things you felt like the tips that she gave you when she said cut out this, that, what was her directive? The first thing I remember she told me is don't stand up there and say, "Hi, my name is Amy and I'm founder of XYZ." That comes in the middle. Let's see. The second thing she really hammered in was make 2 or 3 points, have some type of numbers to back it up, and then wrap up, and have something quick and easy to wrap up with. That's very, very good advice. She's good at what she does, and they've really helped a lot of startups. Seems like a lot of the winners end up actually working with 3C previously, but yeah, I would suggest, so I've seen hundreds of pitches now, and I can know pretty quickly if they're going to be one that's probably going to win, and it follows there is this like storyline, and one thing that 3C is really touching on is like wrap a story around your pitch, humanize it some way, and then only make a few points, right? Like that's what you mentioned is like, what is the 2 or 3 things you really want to hammer in and have data to back that up? And then, one thing I tell a lot of people is prepare for like a minute 20, right? So when you're live in front of a crowd, you tend to talk slower. Most people, some people talk faster, but most people kind of trip up on their words, or like weirdly enough, they add more words than they prepared for. They're like, why am I saying this right now? So it's funny, right? So I say, prepare for like a minute 20. But yeah, you did a really good job. And so let's go back into, Unearth. Yeah. That's the company that you are a co-founder of. And tell us about, or like, where did it come from? What is Unearth, and why are you guys working on that? Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, almost 2 years ago now, I had started thinking about, I was working at a startup with a few other guys, and that startup got acquired. So once I ended up at a big company, I knew it was just a matter of time before I left to go do another startup because
It's what we do.
Yeah, it's like crack. So we all ended up leaving that startup, and we knew we wanted to build an amazing company, a place where we wanted to come into work every day. We knew we really wanted to help solve a real problem in the industry. And so Brian, our CEO, started dabbling with drones and got really enamored by drones and the data that comes from drones and what you could do with that data. And so we expanded it to think about IoT in general, and we looked at about 6 different industries. And within about, I would say, it was quick, like 3 weeks, we really honed in on construction. First of all, construction is a huge industry. It's $1.7 trillion in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
So huge opportunity there. 2, the industry was just starting to adopt technology. So it was really a great time to get into it. And 3, there were some really hit you in the face obvious problems that we could go and solve that were great challenges. So construction's seen a productivity decline over the past 30 years. And they're the only industry in the U.S. that's seen productivity decline.
Right.
So it just kind of felt like the perfect storm in terms of opportunity for us, and we got really excited about it. Brian's family owns a construction company in Texas, so we had customer number 1 ready to be our guinea pig for the next 6 months. And so, we kind of just jumped all in and have been doing it ever since.
That's great. And so the problem that you are solving right now, clearly trillions of dollars, there's many opportunities and whatnot, huge industry. But how are you narrowly focusing, and what exactly is Unearth doing right now with drones and the data?
Well, so that's a good question, and I'd like to emphasize that narrowly focusing has been the hardest part. There is so much opportunity. The first way we decided to focus was based on type of customer. So we're explicitly going after heavy civil contracting companies that are doing what they call horizontal construction. So roads, bridges, highways, open air you can think of. So anything that doesn't have walls. So that really helped us focus, because then we could use the aerial images from drones. You can see the entire site. You don't have to worry about what happens once the walls go up, how you get in the building. So that was how we decided to focus, was on that specific customer. And then within that range, there's also a bunch of different opportunities that our software could help solve, and we've focused explicitly on the collection of build evidence. So basically photos that are already being taken in the field, the aerial images are build evidence, measurements of how much work has been done, documenting them, and then that's available if any dispute arises, which in construction disputes arise constantly, all the time. And so we have so many ideas about how we can expand outside of that, but we're really trying to focus just on that right now.
Yeah. I would imagine that there's almost too much data, or there's a lot.
Yeah.
So how do you guys handle that when they're just, it's similar to, any sort of software that just is tracking everything. What do you do with all that data? So how are you guys, how is Unearth taking that data and making sense of it and helping your customers actually make better decisions?
Yeah, it's actually one of the biggest things that we've been trying to solve, because when I said construction's starting to adopt technology, what happens is there'll be one kind of tech geek in the construction company who's sitting there with all of the cool software and the drone, and they get to see the 3D data model, but no one else has a license to that software. And even if they did, they would have no idea how to use it, especially the people out in the field. So what we do is we help democratize the important parts of the data. So we select only what we think is going to be interesting to other people. So if you look at the data collected from a drone, there's gigabytes of data per flight. And we really condense it down to just that aerial image, and then we throw it on an easy-to-access website from any device to allow anyone on the project, whether in the field, they're in the office, they're in the trailer, to see it at any time, real time.
Interesting. And how does the customer determine that's the important data, or does your company determine, oh, that's the important data?
Both. So we've narrowed it down by saying, well, we know the 2D orthomosaic, or the aerial image, is going to be really important for people to get a contextual view of what's happening on the site. So everyone's going to get to see that. once you have that, you can do a bunch of things with it. You can take measurements on top of it, so you get real-time measurements of how much asphalt you've laid on a road. You can take volume measures if you have stockpiles. You can do all sorts of stuff. You can upload photos. We kind of let the project managers, who are really our heroes of the software, guide how their team is going to use the software by how much data they're going to put into it.
So you're clearly in the industry. We see drones all the time. We're reading about things that are happening with, like, you know, delivery and drones flying all around the cities, like, could be dangerous. What is your, if you go out 5 years, like, what do you look at? What do you see from your perspective of what will be a typical normal experience with drones, whether it's commercial or, you know, even construction or whatnot?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's easier to say this with confidence given Amazon is behind a huge push. But I think drone delivery, no question, is going to be hugely influential to how things get delivered locally. I know Amazon's working on the hardest part, which is regulation. Right. So you say drones flying around. That's really the riskiest part of everything, and the FAA is extremely conservative when it comes to these types of things. So Amazon personally has been driving a ton of that. I would say the other big area I see drones helping in is search and rescue.
Oh, wow.
So search and rescue, I mean, if you think about it, someone gets lost out in a mountain with snow, something that we can relate to in the Pacific Northwest really easily. The easiest way to find them is not by tracking through the snow yourself and trying to look all over, but popping up a drone with a thermal imaging camera. And within 20 minutes, they can take the entire site, and you'll see the spot of where, you know, the heat is coming from, which is where the human is. Right. And so they're starting to use that all over the place, and I think that's going to be extremely influential.
Yeah, I haven't even thought of that. Like, that's an amazing thought of what the great use of drones will be, which is like solving hard problems that even right now humans are very, very struggling with, if you will. But what are you saying, that there's going to be very much regulated flight paths and like areas that there will be specifically for drones to fly and deliver versus like not? Because look, these are 20-50 pound things that are carrying products at some point. Anything that's dropped out of the earth is going to kill someone. So like, how do we regulate that but also innovate in that industry and make things more efficient? How does that all work?
Well, I think you regulate the pilots and the types of aircraft. So it's very similar to, you know, certain pilots can fly in and out of certain airports based on the different class of license that they have, and same with aircrafts in general. Everything's communicated through air traffic control. I think drones are going to have something really similar to that. So already they've regulated certain airspace for drones. So there's space where you can fly without requiring permission. There's space where you require permission. You have to call air traffic control before you can fly. And then there's spaces that are just no-fly zones altogether. I think it's just going to get more and more differentiated. And so they'll end up being spaces likely downtown Seattle you can't fly because it's too close to SeaTac. It's just going to, they'll say, you know, if you're with a large company like Amazon, or Amazon likened to the big airlines like, you know, American, stuff like that, you can fly because the pilots have gone through some type of training. But if not, I mean, definitely not hobbyists. Yeah. They've already restricted hobbyists pretty intensely.
All of us that want to fly all these big drones, good luck, right? All right, so we're gonna shift a little bit, and we're gonna talk about the founder life, given that this is Founders Live. And I'm just curious, you know, you mentioned earlier that you were at a big company, and you're like, it's a matter of time before we jump in another startup. Why? You know, why would you choose to be a founder versus like work at a big company and maybe get a nice salary and paycheck?
Yeah, good question. So I did spend a little under a decade at Microsoft before I made the leap to startup. And when I did, I went to an existing startup. I wasn't immediately a founder. And within a few weeks of being at a startup, I realized that I was obsessed. Like, things just move so fast, and you have so much control and so much autonomy, and you can make change so quickly, and you get access to all of the information that's happening in the company, so you have access to the information you need to make the right decisions to make a product successful. So that was intoxicating, and I knew I was kind of startups for life after that. The decision of whether or not to go to another existing startup after the last one or be a founder was a little bit different. So I would say 6 months before I left, I had started talking to other existing startup companies for roles that they had that I could be interested in. And anytime I talked to these companies, they were really interesting. They looked like they had a lot of potential. But there was always something that was just a little bit off or didn't click with me perfectly. And I realized that if I wanted to find that perfect company for me, the perfect company that I thought embodied, you know, the culture I wanted to be in, a place where I wanted to come into work every day, and a place where I felt people could do the best work possible, I had to start it myself. And I had to start it myself with people who I loved to work with.
Yeah.
So I had started talking to Brian and Nate, are my co-founders. When I spoke with both of them and they were interested in doing the same thing, it was just a no-brainer. It was like a 5-minute conversation. It was like, yeah, we're doing this.
We're starting.
All right, next.
Yeah. Yeah, so you mentioned some interesting words, which are culture, you know, that wraps into like values and, you know, people that you actually want to work with and you're choosing. Actually, the great thing about being a co-founder is typically you're going to like choose your team. And how important was that to you, and what did you and the small team of co-founders deliberately do and choices you've made around the values to create the company?
Yeah, it was everything. The team and the culture is, you know, one of maybe the two most important things that you can have at a company. It's the team, and then it's the execution. I mean, ideas are a dime a dozen, right? So in terms of the culture, I would say we very quickly, as soon as we decided to start hiring additional team members, sat down and decided what we wanted our values to be. And it was a pretty easy conversation because we'd all worked with each other before and we had very similar values. And we worked that into the hiring process.
Right.
So everyone we hired, we wanted to be passionate and bright and skilled at what they were doing, but someone that was going to bring a unique experience to the company that maybe we hadn't had, but that we were going to be able to learn from, and we felt that they would be excited to learn from us.
So you had mentioned, you know, like when you're hiring someone, how do you both balance you're looking for someone that shares the same values and, you know, just like beliefs as you, but at the same time allows for a balance in culture? Because you don't want to just hire the people that look exactly the same as you and have the same background. How do you balance that?
Yeah. First, it was kind of easy being in construction, and none of us had solid construction backgrounds. Anytime I saw anything related to construction or office to field on a resume, I kind of clung to it. So, and we're working with drones. So the first two engineers we hired worked with us at our last company. So we knew they were a cultural fit from the beginning. Yeah, that was an easy decision. The next two engineers we hired, one of them was a pilot for Horizon Airlines, I think, for 2 years. And before that, he worked at Boeing for like 6 years. Completely different background than us, but very related to drones and flying and regulations and stuff like that. The other person we ended up hiring has worked in like mechanical, electrical engineering for a while and had a very strong background in field to office, which is what we focus on a lot in construction, is the office and field communicating. And that kind of stuck out to us. We interviewed a ton of candidates and passed up extremely technically qualified candidates in order to wait till we found that perfect cultural fit that would meet our values but also bring this unique experience with them. So we just took longer to hire, honestly.
How do you approach running a company, being a leader and a founder, at the same time trying to live a life and stay sane and have a relationship and just like have a life outside of your company?
Yeah.
You know, and you're leading by example. So how do you approach that?
Well, it's not easy. You know, it's something you have to work at just as hard as you work at your company. So if I didn't work at it, I would end up working all the time because I'm so excited about kind of each and every detail of what's happening every day. So I schedule things. I mean, it's different for every person, but for me, I live and die by my calendar. So I just put things on my calendar. I put date night with my husband on my calendar. I put, you know, he travels a lot for work. So some weeks he'll be gone and I'll have an event like 2 nights a week and a cocktail with someone another night. And I'll like pick a night and I'll be like, this is the night where you go home and you spend time by yourself. And or I schedule tennis or whatever activity. Yeah. Everything just gets scheduled on the calendar, and I'm pretty good at keeping to my calendar.
Yeah.
So that's how I handle it, and I feel like it's so critical to be able to have that founder life balance, because if you don't and you fall into the rut of, well, I can just work, 24 hours, or I'll just work and get that done, you stop being critical about the activities you're doing. Mm-hmm. And it's being choosy about how you're spending your time that makes you spend your time on the very most important things, and you don't end up wasting your time on things that aren't that important.
Right. But how do you get over the feeling guilty? There is this like feeling guilty aspect. I've been there and done that and I'm out of it, but like there is this like the things like, Gary Vaynerchuk, he can talk, like, I think he puts out a ton of great content, but when he's putting out working till 1 a.m., what he's doing is influencing a lot of other individuals and founders that they think that they should always be working until like the wee hours of the morning. And so then when they don't do that, they feel guilty, right? So how do you work around or have the discipline of not feeling guilty when you do schedule your own time, or you schedule date night with your husband? Like, how do you get through that feeling guilty? Because I think it's natural. It's
definitely natural, and it still crops up for me occasionally. I'd be lying if I said it didn't ever. You have to push it down and fight it away, but I think it just takes experience. Like, even outside of the founder life balance, before I was a founder, when I had my very first job at Microsoft, I worked crazy hours because I was obsessed with putting in as much time as possible to do the best job I could do. And it took being there for 3 or 4 years before I realized, like, oh, 1, I'm going to burn out. 2, I'm not prioritizing the most important work because I feel like, time isn't an issue, so I can just work forever. And 3, I'm not being the best employee I could be. And so as I progressed in my career, I learned to discipline myself in terms of how much time I spent and not feeling guilty about taking time to myself, because it was refreshing, and oftentimes you learn things about your work and you come up with these incredible insights when your brain is actually at rest.
Right.
So it just takes time and experience to kind of be comfortable with it, and the guilt will still creep up. I've got engineers who are sitting in the office at like 8 o'clock at night, and I'm about to leave, and I'm like, oh, should I be staying in the office? I feel so bad going home and enjoying a glass of wine. But,
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned like there's times in the day and times like where if you're not working, you might be exercising, you might be, a lot of ideas come in the shower for some reason. I think that's just because your mind is so not in it that insights come to you just randomly, right? So I think what you're saying is, the way that I view it is almost, it's a bell curve, okay? And what I've tried to do personally is optimize myself in that bell curve where I'm spending enough time engaged in my work and like they're again living by my calendar, but if I'm spending too much time, I know that my efficiency and like just like being like I'm not on point after a certain point in time.
Totally.
And you feel like you're not creative, you're not you're not getting back to the people you need to get back to. You're not, if you're writing code, you're just not actually on your game, and it's because you're at the bottom of the bell curve, and it's because you've spent too much time or you're burnt out. And so I think what you're saying is like structure your calendar in the way, and it probably takes a little bit of acknowledgement or self-awareness of how you work personally, but like structure your calendar so that you're at the top of the bell curve and you're not like dipping down and putting yourself in, too long of work period, or you know what I mean? So
absolutely, if you're feeling unproductive, get out,
right,
shut it off, turn on the TV or go take a run or whatever it is that you do. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. So when you feel those like guilty points, like what is that a signal to like, what is that a signal for if you're feeling that guilty pull? Because I think that's a really weird thing. As a founder, we all know it. We've all been there. And you're like, why? It's a Sunday at 3 p.m. Why do I feel like I need to work? That sucks.
It sucks, and I feel like I walk through it. I ask myself, is there something Monday that you feel like you need to prepare for? Do you feel like there's something that you didn't get done last week that you meant to get done before the week starts? Is there a deadline? And if there's no good answer, you have to learn to ignore it.
Right. So last question, and this is something that's like in the last couple of years of my life I've really adopted, but do you practice any sort of like meditation or like any sort of like spiritual or any sort of practice that helps you stay like in the moment, and then realizing like that there's more to life than just like working at your company all the time?
So I was introduced to the practice of mindfulness, actually by my father, who's a lawyer, so completely unrelated to technology.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know. And I wish I could say I practiced it every single day, or I meditated every single day, because the benefits I get from it are intense ability to focus, intense ability to understand yourself and what you're thinking, and if you have that feeling of guilt, to stop, think about it, examine it, and then make an educated decision on why you're feeling that way, and not just guilt but fear and anger and all those different feelings. It's been so helpful in work and life, and like I said, I wish I said I practice it every day, but I'm not that disciplined. Whenever I start to feel a little bit off kilter, that's kind of where I go to.
When did you adopt that?
I would say I investigated adopting it probably 5 years ago when my father
investigated it,
sent it to me, and I learned about it, and I was like, oh, this is great, but I didn't need it at that time in my life. I was working at someone else's startup, and I was having a great time, and things were great. And it wasn't until things like the rubber hit the road with my own startup as a founder that I really felt the need to figure out how I could have more focus and be present and in the moment for company decisions, but be able to put company aside and be present in the moment for my life experiences as well, and be able to kind of context switch but be fully present for both of them. And that's when that was a year ago, and that's when I really investigated it, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's
amazing. It's probably been almost 2 years now that I really stepped into it, just from a meditation standpoint. And I'm still early in my journey, but for me, it's just it's a morning thing. It's a daily thing. And it's really helped me. In the end, I spend 10, 15 minutes every morning, and it really helps me just think about, it's all about the present, today, the moment. And even if you shouldn't be worrying about what's going to happen tonight when it's 9 or 7 or 8 a.m. You should not be thinking about 5 p.m. What I'm trying to do is say, what today, who am I need to be today? Who am I supposed to connect with today? What is, and actually it's more about just being open for the signal to what is needed today in this world that I can benefit the people or others in. And you just kind of, it is mindfulness, and it's being open to where you can actually add value and where you can, where you're supposed to be. And to me, it just has really helped me to center on not thinking about tomorrow, not thinking about next week. Because as a founder, you're always thinking about the future. You're always oh, we're gonna be this at this year and this thing. You know what? What about today? And who are you gonna impact today?
Absolutely.
And who you need to be today. And that's really helped me. Is so what, and the thing that I struggled with early on, or just even before I started a practice of meditation, was I thought I was going to do it wrong. I thought that there was a right way to do it. And there's actually no right way, right? So and it's weird to think that, but it's you just start a practice, and I simply just turn on music and actually spend 10 or 15 minutes by myself, allow my mind to just settle. And by the end, you have a peacefulness for the day. And this is to start the day. It's really helped me stay present, to think about what I want to accomplish that day and who I want to impact. So I would just just to end this, I would just say I think anyone watching this is think about how you want to incorporate that in your life. Sounds like you have is this something that you do in the morning? Is this something you do periodically throughout the day? How do you approach that?
So I actually try to do it at night before I go to bed.
At night, right?
Because I feel like sleep is actually really important to me. And I am so jealous of the people who can be insanely productive on 4 hours, but unfortunately I need my full 8.
Not me. It's not me either.
So I try to do it at night before I go to bed to clear my mind, so I can have a great sleep and wake up in the morning and be fresh. The thing that really resonated with me was about mindfulness was being in a meeting and thinking about the next meeting. You're not focusing on the meeting you're on. You're thinking about the next meeting. And then you go to the next meeting, and instead of focusing on that, you're thinking about the next meeting.
So then you're not effective. You're
not effective in that meeting.
You're not present. You're not effective. And it actually is it's such a bad, you're wasting time.
Absolutely.
Being mindfulness is present. Being present. And being present with that person or that team, you're able to really take in information and data and make a decision. But if you're just thinking about the next meeting, that is one of the worst things you can do, and I think it takes self-awareness to actually realize that you're actually doing that. You know what I mean?
That's actually what
weird?
mindfulness is to me.
Mindfulness is self-awareness.
Mindfulness, to me, is less about making sure I meditate in the evenings, which I really wish I did, but I'm not that great at it. It's just knowing the concept and being in a meeting and catching myself wandering to the next meeting and being able to say to myself, Amy, you're wandering to the next meeting.
Pull it back.
Pull yourself back, focus on this meeting, and when you're in that meeting, you can think about that meeting. So to me, it's just a learning that I went through that now I'm able to apply hour after hour in my day that helps me be more successful.
God, that's amazing. That's awesome. All right, well, cheers. Thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you. This was awesome.